Getting our first look right now at long-awaited Republican legislation to repeal and replace Obamacare. Details are being released as we speak. Coming up shortly, I'll be joined by the two House committee chairmen who will be leading the efforts to get this bill to the floor, each in their respective committees dealing with one of the two parts of this legislation. It is a bill that, unlike Obamacare and its 2,400 pages, is only about 120 pages total. We start with exactly what Republicans are proposing. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live tonight with the breaking details on Capitol Hill. Good evening, Mike.
Brett, good evening. That GOP blueprint is being posted this evening. Separate components from House Ways and Means and Energy and Commerce working in conjunction, and GOP leaders say it is time to deliver.
Americans need relief. They deserve a new direction. That's why we're taking action to repeal and replace Obamacare with health care solutions that can actually work for the American people.
Tonight, HHS Secretary Tom Price and Budget Director Mick Mulvaney are expected to have dinner with President Trump to review the proposal, with Mulvaney as a founding member of the House Freedom Caucus seen as critical to winning over the conservative wing. The Ways and Means proposal calls for dismantling Obamacare taxes and mandates, expanding health savings accounts, and providing a monthly tax credit to people who don't receive insurance through work.
What the president's goal is to give people choices, to let them purchase the kind of insurance that they want for themselves and for their family, not what Washington forces them to buy. This is a real important distinction between where we are right now in that individual and small group market and where we want to go.
The Energy and Commerce Plan calls for a patient and state stability fund, giving states flexibility, responsibly unwinding Obamacare's Medicaid expansion, and strengthening Medicaid. Some of the discomfort has come from the tax credit concept.
There is a big divide between, in essence, the conservative camp within the caucus saying we feel uncomfortable at this point with the idea of a refundable tax credit, and other folks saying, wait a minute, this is a way of funding an HSA, a health savings account, that would be applicable to everybody.
And Maine Republican Senator Susan Collins has warned Republicans are not unified.
There is not a consensus. It is very complicated, and we shouldn't rush it. We need to get this right.
Even before its release, the GOP's plan was under attack from the Senate's top Democrat.
They don't want the folks to see it until the very last minute. Just rush it through. I don't blame them. It's going to be very hard for Republicans to be proud of this plan.
Lawmakers are just now getting a look at this GOP health care blueprint. The House Ways and Means and Energy and Commerce committees are expected to work on the package later this week. Brett?
Thanks, Mike. Now a special report exclusive. We go behind the scenes to see how Republican lawmakers will manage the legislation through the often Byzantine approval process. And we'll talk specifics. Joining me tonight from Scottsdale, Arizona, is House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Kevin Brady. And from Capitol Hill, House Energy and Commerce Committee Chairman Greg Walden. Chairman, thank you for joining me. Let's start and break this up. There are two committees here dealing with two parts of this legislation. Chairman Brady, let me start with you and Ways and Means, and I guess the tax part of this equation.
Yes, so it has been 7 years since Obamacare was passed into law. It is collapsing. It has hurt more people than it's helped. And so tonight we deliver on President Trump's promise to repeal and begin replacing it with two big principles. One, to restore state control of health care, get it out of Washington, and also restore the free market, so give individuals the power and the freedom to choose plans that's right for them. That second part is in the Ways and Means area. So we begin by repealing the awful taxes, the mandate penalties, and the subsidies in Obamacare, and to give Americans the freedom to buy plans that they need. That includes nearly doubling the size of the health savings accounts and make them more usable. That's good for the out-of-pocket costs. But we give them a tax credit immediately usable that ranges in price from $2,000 to $14,000 a year, depends upon their age and their family. And with that, they can buy affordable plans that are approved and certified in the state that they're in. And these are plans that they need and can use, not the plans that Washington's been dictating to them.
How is this, Chairman Brady, not Obamacare light from your perspective?
Yeah, it is Obamacare gone, because we repeal all those taxes, those mandates, those subsidies. There's nothing left there. And instead, we give them the same tax break that we give workers at big businesses. We give that same tax help to small business people, those mom and pop businesses, workers at small businesses, even those entrepreneurs and families in between jobs, the ability to buy a plan that's right for them. And I think maybe most importantly, we're giving Americans a freedom who haven't got health care at work, and they don't have in a government program freedom like they've never had before to buy health care that's right for them. So this is clearly Obamacare gone and new freedom.
And Chairman Brady, last thing on this is, are the tax credits means tested?
We focused on, obviously, we want to make sure that as you get older, your health care premium increases, or your tax credit increases. And also as your family expands, we want it to expand with you as well. And so we focused it really on the low and the middle income families who don't get health care at work. This is really important whether you're a young person starting, just leaving school and your parents' health care, whether you're a small business person just struggling to make ends meet, or you're a retiree who's worked your whole life and there's a few years left before Medicare. This really fits what Americans need.
All right, Chairman Walden, you're dealing with the energy and commerce legislation and basically Medicaid and what happens with Medicaid.
Well, Brett, when we repeal and replace Obamacare, it will amount to the biggest entitlement reform probably at least the last 20 years, certainly since the Clinton days when they reformed welfare. And what we want to do is restore power to the states, put Medicaid on a budget, and get back to where you have a doctor-patient relationship in health care and in the individual insurance market, which, as you know, as you've reported on, is collapsing all around us. 1 out of 3 counties, patients have one choice for an insurance plan. But let me make clear a couple things we're going to make sure. We're not pulling the rug out from under people. We're not going back to the days where those with pre-existing conditions were penalized or could not access health insurance, and not back to the days of lifetime caps or allowing your kids not to be on your insurance till they're 26. Those protections stay as we reform Medicaid and get it on a budget, get it back to the states. And let me give you one example, Brett, that I think says it all. Governor Herbert from Utah petitioned the federal government to be able just to communicate by email with his Medicaid recipients who had email. 9 months later, the federal bureaucrat said he couldn't do it. By email, they told him that. That would have saved his state $6 million. This is the kind of thing that makes no sense, drives up costs. We want to get back to where our governors and our states and our local governments can innovate with those most in need, those on Medicaid, make sure they're properly cared for, and that we get waste, fraud, and abuse out of the system.
Now, this includes pre-existing conditions. It includes keeping your child on there till 26?
Yes, indeed, and no lifetime caps. We think those were all important provisions. Those were, frankly, in many cases, Republican provisions long before there was an Obamacare. I worked on some of these issues way back in the 90s when I was in the state legislature because, you know, health issues don't look at your voter registration card. They just hit your family. And we want to make sure those most in need get the care they deserve, are not excluded just because you have a pre-existing condition.
Well, Chairman Walden, as you make this shift, if this all passes, how do you avoid a drop in the total number of those insured?
You know, I think we'll restore the markets. Right now, the biggest threat is that the health insurance market itself and the individual market is collapsing. We've seen rate increases of 25%, 27%. I get letters all the time from people saying, I can't afford what they're selling. And if you look at the individual mandate and what it's done in that market, 2/3 of those say they're going to pay the penalty or get a waiver. Only 1/3 signed up for Obamacare insurance. It's out of whack. It's not working. And as the CEO of Aetna said, it's in a death spiral. So what we want to do is create a market that's affordable and available and that works in partnership with what Chairman Brady's doing on the tax credit side. We think we can get there and we can get coverage back into the marketplace that right now is collapsing.
Yeah, Chairman Brady, I want to turn to you. Where do you think the biggest pushback, even within your own caucus, is going to come from? I know you're pitching this and the whole bill goes out tonight, but honestly, you can't lose more than 21 votes in your caucus to get it through the House, let alone what you're going to face in the Senate. Where do you think the biggest pushback comes from?
Well, I am confident we are going to pass this and deliver on President Trump's promise to repeal and replace. Look, these policies have passed the House a number of times in the repeal area. The replacement are long-standing Republican policies of giving control back to the states and to the individuals as well. We are making sure this is fiscally responsible as well. So I see all the elements are there. We've been listening very carefully to our Republican members for months now, and over the weekend as well, to make sure we get it right for them. So the changes you see in this legislation that's online tonight and available for Americans to read, I think are exactly in the right place.
But for conservatives, are you willing to, is the Speaker, is the leadership willing to kind of use the political capital here to bring conservatives over, and then you have the debt ceiling, possible government shutdown battles, the tax reform issue? Is Chairman Brady, is the political capital going to be used on this?
Yes, it is, and it should be. This is one of our key promises as Republicans. We know we can do so much better than Obamacare, and I think the proposal we lay out tonight in that step-by-step basis, which is just the opposite of the Affordable Care Act, is exactly what the American people need, and I guarantee you House Republicans are going to deliver for the president.
Chairman Walden, final word here. Are you confident that this bill brings costs down?
I think it will, especially in combination with what Secretary Price can do at HHS. A lot of power over there to turn the levers, pull the levers and turn the dials and get real reforms in the market. Restore to the states the ability to make some of these decisions. We've reached out to the states. They've said, please, please, a one-size-fits-all doesn't work for our states. This is part of why our markets are collapsing. So I think in combination the answer is yes, and I think we're going to get this done. We're proud of our product. It's online now. People can read it and give us their feedback. We'll have an open and transparent markup in the very near future.
Chairman Brady and Walden, thank you very much.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
Meantime, President Trump has signed his second executive order instituting a travel ban for potential immigrants, and there is a lot of finger-pointing going on tonight over the president's accusations that his predecessor had the Trump Tower phones tapped. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has all the details on a busy night. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. The White House announced today that President Trump will ask the courts to revoke his initial immigration bill, the one that's been mired in the courts now in some 48 different cases for weeks, and then he's going to try it all over again.
The president laid low on the new executive order, signing it in private, out of sight of the cameras, leaving the rollout to his lieutenants.
While no system can be made completely infallible, the American people can have high confidence. We are identifying ways to improve the vetting process and thus keep terrorists from entering our country.
The new order aims to do the same thing as the first one, keep certain people with no previous status in the U.S. and who are currently overseas out of the country. Today, the Attorney General offered new evidence of the need to temporarily ban all refugees from the U.S.
Today, more than 300 people, according to the FBI, who came here as refugees are under an FBI investigation today for potential terrorism-related activities.
The first executive order caused chaos at immigration checkpoints before being halted by the courts. While opponents call the new order more of the same, the White House insists this one will pass legal muster with none of the confusion of the initial rollout.
I have spent much of the day today on the phone with members of Congress, the leadership, explaining the ins and outs of this EO, and I did the same thing last week. So there should be no surprises, whether it's in the media or on Capitol Hill.
The White House again today offered no evidence to back up President Trump's extraordinary assertion on Saturday that his predecessor had green-lighted wiretapping Trump Tower during the closing weeks of the election. But officials from the president on down called on Congress to investigate.
Let's investigate this and see where it leads. So let's have the House and Senate Intelligence Committees do their work and think about whether to include this, but the president has made clear that he would like there to be an investigation of any possible abuses.
Fox News has learned that the FBI leadership asked the Justice Department to send out a tweet refuting the president's claims, that Director James Comey believes the assertion to be false and must be corrected. But senior White House staff indicated the president's not buying what Comey is trying to sell.
Does President Trump accept the FBI director's denial?
You know, I don't think he does, George.
Republican members of Congress walked a difficult line between backing the president and reporting what they knew to be true.
I've seen no evidence of the allegations we've seen in the media. That doesn't mean that none of these things happened. It simply means I haven't seen that yet.
Democrats rejected the idea that the president was being spied on, but said, either way, it looks bad.
If he falsely spread this kind of misinformation, that is so wrong. It's beneath the dignity of the presidency. If it's true, it's even worse for the president, because that means that a federal judge, independently elected, has found probable cause that the president or people on his staff have had probable cause to have broken the law or to have interacted with a foreign agent.
If the president was simply trying to change the subject away from the disastrous end of a week for him, mission accomplished. But in doing so, he has ignited a whole new line of questioning that could consume his staff for days to come. Brett?
John Roberts live on the North Lawn. John, thank you. Let's get some perspective now on these major stories tonight. Senior political analyst Britt Hume joins us tonight from Boca Grande, Florida. Good evening, Britt. I want to start with the rollout of Obamacare, which is really the biggest thing we've been waiting for, the details. And as you get down into these details, do you think that Republicans are going to go after each other on some of this, or that they'll unite?
I think that Republicans will be fine on most of this, Brett, but there's always been this problem that Obamacare included these subsidies for people to enable them to buy insurance under the Obamacare plan. And the repeal of Obamacare obviously take those subsidies away. And we all know, Brett, from years of watching entitlement reform efforts go by, that the hardest thing in the world to do is to revoke a benefit once it has been granted by law. So what the Republicans have done here is replace the Obamacare subsidy with a tax credit, which is, in effect, another form of subsidy. And there are conservatives in the House, and I think, we know who some of them are, who think this is a bad idea, that it amounts to Obamacare light, or at least an element of Obamacare light, as they have said. So I think the Republicans in the House leadership have some work to do to sell this idea of the credit to some of the more conservative members. And if they don't round enough of them up, of course, they may be denied the majority they need to pass it. That's just one phase of this, but I think that's a trouble spot.
And the OMB director, Mick Mulvaney, formerly of the House Freedom Caucus, is apparently going to lead some of that. And they can lose 20 votes, but they lose 21, and it goes down in the House. And then in the Senate, obviously, they need 51 votes to get through with reconciliation.
Yeah, they use the budget process to eliminate the possibility of a filibuster, so they could do it with 51 votes, but it remains to be seen, obviously, of course, whether there'll be misgivings in the Senate. One sense is, Brett, that this is the start of the process, and that there'll be negotiations going forward, and there'll be all kinds of melodrama and perils of Pauline moments when the whole thing looks like it's going to come apart. But doing something this big is never easy, and I think it's too early to say that it's really in trouble. And this at least is a plan. They've been, critics have been saying for the longest time, Brett, that they don't have a plan. Well, now they have a plan.
Very specific.
It's something that's yeah, exactly.
It's all being laid out there. I want to get your thoughts of the other story that kind of consumed the weekend, and President Trump's tweets about wiretapping and the fallout from all of this.
Two things, Brett. One is that there doesn't appear to be any available substantiation for the president's claim that his predecessor authorized or otherwise allowed or even ordered him to be wiretapped. It's not at all clear that Mr. Trump was wiretapped, that President Trump was wiretapped when he was still Mr. Trump, and the president has presented no evidence to the contrary. At the same time, of course, we're in the middle of this firestorm over claims that there might have been collusion, but claims that there was collusion between the Trump campaign and Russian interest or Russian intelligence, and there's no substantiation for that either, as far as we know. So what we have here is a battle of competing claims, neither of which seems to be very, very well founded.
And very quickly, Britt, you have Chuck Grassley writing a letter to the FBI director in which he says that the FBI and associates of the Clinton campaign paid former British spy Christopher Steele to investigate the Republican nominee at a time when he was getting paid by the Democratic campaign. He wants to know, what is the deal with this? This is for that infamous dossier.
Yeah, this is that dossier, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, we know a couple of things about the dossier, Brett, is that there are a number of things in it that are known to be false, and it is widely thought to be pretty scurrilous. So it does raise the question of why the FBI would be, preparing to do business with this guy. And apparently it never went forward. In other words, they negotiated they were going to work with him in some way, and then the whole thing blew up in the press about the dossier, and it never went forward. But it seems to me that Senator Grassley, Chairman Grassley, is on solid ground in asking for an explanation of this, which is what the purpose of his letter was. It'll be interesting to see how the FBI director, who seems to be at the center of nearly everything these days, responds.
Exactly. Britt, as always, thank you. Up next, the U.S. Supreme Court says it is staying out of the controversy over transgender bathrooms. We'll have a live report. Keep it here.